Hello, everybody. This is Chris McAdoo. I am the Chief Experience Officer for a little organization called the Knoxville Entrepreneur Center, a nonprofit business accelerator dedicated to changing lives through entrepreneurship. Today, very happy to be joined by Max Dordevic. Did I say that right, Max?
Dordevic, Georgievich. I've gotten it all. But yes, you said it right.
Max is joining us today from Austin, Texas. He's had to fly back for some things, but he is here in the Techstars Industries of the Future Accelerator in Knoxville, Tennessee. Max, your company is NeuroX1. Tell us a little bit about that company and what you guys do.
Sure. So we, in short, use AI to design new medicine for neurological and neurodegenerative disorders. So think Alzheimer's, various types of dementia, MS, Parkinson's, ALS, that sort of thing. And then we dabble in some rare disease. So those which tend to be on the pediatric side. So a lot of diseases you've never heard of with very tiny patient populations, but essentially we're making drugs sort of from scratch in a way. So the old school method was just brute force, and think of it like you have it's called high throughput screening. You have a big keychain in your drug target. So in the case of Alzheimer's, is amyloid beta. That's the lock, and you're shoving the key into the lock, and you're seeing if it opens the door, right? That's sort of the old school way. What we do instead is we, in effect, mold the key to that lock. And so it's much more efficient, but you also end up with drugs that are tailor-made for that particular target rather than pulling it out of some library or off the shelf or out of the literature and just sort of seeing if it'll ad hocing it, basically.
Well, and so what is the power behind, when we say machine learning, when we say artificial intelligence, people think of a million different things. Right.
Yeah.
So what is the power of multiplication of the system that you guys are building to both discover and, as you say, like sometimes create or discover totally novel, combinations?
Yeah. So I would say, first off, our biggest tailwind, I think, was November of 22 when GPT-4 or ChatGPT came out. Because when we started the company, we were like familiar conceptually with that. Like we had read the white papers and whatever. We're like, well, we can apply, when you design a drug, basically you can't use the same technology that you would be using in like a ChatGPT, which is a language model, right? Because the target, your body's 3 dimensions, the target's 3 dimensions, the molecule's 3 dimensions. There's a million other factors. It just doesn't work, right? So you sort of conceptually apply that idea, but you're applying it to sort of well-validated physics and chemistry based models.
Gotcha.
So they have nothing to do with a language model or GPT-4 or 5 or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it's sort of, if you think of write me an essay on Thomas Edison, that essay that it gives you, is the list of molecules. But in our case, there's a lot of stuff going on under the hood. So we plug in the target, that being sort of your prompt, right? And then that essay being your list of molecules that have all the characteristics that you want, given the disease and sort of the profile that you're looking for. So you want it to be as really good tox profile. So, on your liver, on your brain, on your, name it, we want it to have a low tox profile. We want it to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. We want it to bind really tightly, but we want it to not hit other drug targets that sort of are adjacent. So if you look at a drug like Prozac is like shotgun to the brain. Yes, it's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, but like it still hits a million other things, and there's a million side effects and whatever. And so the idea behind sort of molding that key is getting a really hyper specific drug, into the hands of a pharma partner, and then eventually onto the market.
So I'm going to ask this question in sort of a two-part. One is, what do you see as the market potential for NeuroX1? Are there other companies operating in the space? Do you have paths that you can follow that makes sense? And then two, what could the overall impact be to people? The folks that are going to receive the benefits of these drugs.
Okay, so for question one, we're not the only company in the space. Now, the sort of beautiful thing about therapeutics and making drugs is that it's not a winner take all market. And so what I mean by that is you can have, I mean, why are there 20 antidepressants on the market? Well, because for some people, Prozac works, and for some people, Zoloft works better. And for, I mean, it's competitive, but like, Wellbutrin, and there's a million, right? And there's reasons for that. People respond to these differently. Biology is really complicated. And so it ends up not really being a winner take all market. Now, it can be winner take most in some cases, but especially if you're the only option available. But there's probably 20 other companies that do what we do in gastrointestinal, in peripheral diseases, in metabolic disorders, and sort of name the indication. Somebody's with cancer, right? Oncology. There's somebody working on a drug with some sort of generative platform. This sort of quote OG, like the largest in our space would be like an in silico medicine based out of Hong Kong and New York. And then a Recursion, which is based out of Salt Lake City, and a couple others, but those are probably the two largest. Recursion's the only, and Exscientia out of the UK. Exscientia and Recursion are publicly traded. In Silico is probably the largest private company in Citro. There are a handful of others, but maybe 2-3 dozen that actually have sort of raised the cash and been able to get a solid generative platform up and running. But then ultimately to the patients, there's so many diseases that don't have a treatment at all. Like, end of story, period. Can you treat the symptoms? Maybe. Sort of depends on the disease. And so the benefit is like, somebody like us is working on a handful of rare diseases that are, and with rare disease, by the way, you can sort of fast track that through the FDA. Now, fast is relative, but like it's much faster than, call it less than 10 years versus over 10 years,
okay.
Depending on how it's done. But you can, work on a disease that, I mean, you talk to sort of parents of some of these patient advocacy groups, where their kid has this rare disease and there's 30 in the US, maybe globally, a couple hundred. And I mean, you just see like, they're so defeated. I mean, they've been through the ringer because there's nothing to treat their disease. And I mean, the worst thing you can do is kind of sort of get someone's hopes up in that, on that case. But like, the best we can say is like, we'll do our best to try and see if we can get something across the finish line. And there's a handful of ways to do that. So we can generate a novel molecule, which will take longer. But in the meantime, you can repurpose an existing drug, meaning there's something approved already that a doctor can prescribe you off-label that might be efficacious in their disease, that might prolong their lifespan. So you can actually get that novel drug approved that's actually more on the curative side versus symptomatic side. But in any case, it's like you can be more specific, you have fewer side effects. You generate drugs that are much more defensible because they're novel. And then you can sort of get into this almost precision medicine territory where it becomes a lot easier to develop. I mean, if you have 30 patients in the US or the world or whatever, you can design a drug for them much more efficiently than you could have 15, 20 years ago. And that drug, depending on sort of a million different things, might be commercially viable. And if not, you might break even on it. But regardless, you can actually get that drug to the patient way faster. And if you're in a state like Texas, which is like a right to try state, you have somebody sort of with the guts to try it, theoretically you can get it to them sooner. But I'm not huge on the regulatory side, so I don't want to I'm not sure how each state works. It could be that, it'd be a whole other podcast. But
so you're coming from a background where you actually studied, economics, and I know you have a biotech history. You worked with Merck. This is your third round in this particular entrepreneurial road.
First venture backed.
First venture backed. Third round as a company. What actually got you started down this road?
The really short version of the story is I tripped over a hurdle in college, broke my ankle, was around doctors a bunch, and I watched a brain surgery, and I said, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I need to be a doctor. Well, when you're an econ major, you haven't taken the additional 2 years of the other stuff that you have to take. And so I'm like, okay, well, 2 years, all right, med school 50-50 role, that 50-50 chance I get into a med school. And now neurosurgery, okay, I have to place in neuro. And it's like, I'm even be a neurosurgeon, or like, I don't want to be a dermatologist. It's like neuro or forget it. So this doctor encouraged me, who is now ultimately on our advisory board, was like, go work at a biotech, go intern, go find a research group. You can research for me or whatever. But worked at a couple biotechs doing research, published some papers. And I just fell in love with the idea of like, you're providing, like, you're doing just news. I mean, if you're making, I originally wanted to go into like the finance side of things. When you start college in 2010, you're just like, okay, banking, sure. But ultimately, I was like, the idea of that you can actually, and having met people that have actually made a killing in this industry, go, well, you can have a great life, and even if you don't, like, you're making progress scientifically, you're providing a ton of value, and hopefully the value, is accretive, and you ultimately, get a great return for your investors, hopefully yourself. Although in biotech, I will say you get diluted substantially. But I don't really care. It's more about like, can we create something that will actually help people? And that's the most cliche answer on the planet. But like, genuinely, I think we're at this inflection point where you can create a drug and get it into patients at least for half or a third the price you might have if we were having this conversation in 2005 or 2010 or 2015.
Wow.
This is sort of the first wave where personalized medicine is not quite the right term I would use, but you can start to get pretty close to that area where you can, again, a lot of everything in biotech is sort of, it depends, but you get to this point where, if there are 30 people with a disease, hyper rare, there's no treatment, it's fatal, you can make a drug for that patient population and probably break even, assuming you do everything right. Now, there are a lot of assumptions in there, but break even if you lose money, who cares? It's like you were able to give a medicine to people that need it. They can take it, before their sort of clock runs out. And that's ultimately what I care about. It's such a cool industry because you get to see all the stuff that you read about on the news or, in the newspaper, or hear about it, on TV or whatever in 10 years. Like, oh, we got a drug approved for Alzheimer's. Well, we haven't had a drug approved for Alzheimer's in 25 years. There's one, basically, there's two approved, one on the market. And so it's like, but you get to see that well before it even, especially where we are, which is a discovery company, 10 to 15 years before it even gets into, makes it to market. Ideally sooner, but that's sort of the traditional timeline.
So I guess a question then would be, and then we'll sort of wrap things up, is with all that behind you, right? And sort of the understanding of where things have been, where you are trying to take things from that brute force method to, essentially molding the key to the lock, is what do you see? What do you see as the potential for the technology that you're developing, and what would you like to see for NeuroX1 moving forward?
Well, I think in the short term, it makes diseases like Alexander syndrome or Sanfilippo syndrome or spinal muscular dysplasia, some of these like very rare disorders, especially pediatric, certain types of brain cancer that affect children more often than they affect adults. Much sort of, it's the joke in drug discovery is like, somebody tweeted this the other day, a very legendary, biotech guy who started one of the largest pharma companies on the planet. He tweeted, drug discovery is hard. Well, it's like, yeah, no kidding. But like when he was doing it, this was, people would sleep under the X-ray crystallography machines that would pull the structure in their Boston lab, because they wanted to save on electricity because these things go off. There's so much heat. And now it's like, you can, our team's distributed where we, Texas, Minnesota, California, Boston, Massachusetts, half our team's roughly in Boston. But you can get to your final, like what we call it a lead candidate in pharma. You can get to your lead candidate orders of magnitude faster than you could otherwise. Now, do you still have to run wet lab experiments? Yes. Do you still have to put it through mice? Yes. Do you still have to put it through, go through a clinical trial process. Yeah, but depending on the type of disease, you might be able to fast track it. But regardless, like you're doing one of two things. You're lowering the failure rate and creating a drug that has much better tolerability, is more so the long and short of it is, it's a better drug faster. It's more likely to work than if you were to just sort of guess and check. And a patient is going to be able to see that, on their, something their doctor can prescribe to them, several years earlier than you would have if we were having this conversation in 1995 or 2005 or even 2010 and 2015. And AI is not a panacea by any means. Like, AI is it's very nascent technology, but we do it in a way that's very based. It's grounded in research and reality, and sort of not. There's some models and some ways you can sort of drug discovery that are very sort of, pie in the sky is not the right word, but like everyone hypes this thing up called AlphaFold. AlphaFold is an amazing piece of technology developed by Google DeepMind. It predicts protein folding, and it basically allows you to get a protein crystal structure. This is started getting really in the weeds, but people have hyped this up for like 2-3 years. Little has come of it other than it's great for sort of experimentation and toying around. But if you're going to go take a drug through clinical development, preclinical and clinical development, you still have to go get that protein, get the crystal structure, put it through it, get the actual real world 3-dimensional crystal structure. It's great at prediction 75% of the time ish, but like, you don't know if your 75, if your thing is that 75%. So if you're going to devote a lot of resources to something, you better be damn sure that you're sort of heading in the right direction, because it's an industry of like, if you hit, you hit big. I mean, it's a sort of like venture, where it's like you have enough drugs sort of in a pipeline at various stages that you can sell and license out and partner off. But at the end of the day, like, you only need one of those to hit, to return all the whether it's the rare, you need your AD drug, Alzheimer's, to hit, or your MS drug to hit, or your ALS drug to hit, that offsets what you'll probably break even on your rare.
What has it meant for you to be part of the Knoxville community and part of the Techstars ecosystem?
Knoxville and Tennessee in general has a little like Texas, in that like Texas loves Texas and Tennessee loves Tennessee, and they want you to be in Tennessee, and they want you to. So I'm sorry that we have to do this remotely, but they genuinely want you. It's not like some BS, like, hey, come have some lab space here and we'll try to do something. No, they want you. They genuinely want you there. Like, they want to build up the ecosystem. When we went to Nashville with a couple other Techstars folks, a week or two ago, similar thing. I mean, even though it's not Knoxville, there's like Knoxville, Nashville, doesn't matter. Like, we want you in Tennessee because like this is a great place to like build a company. And I've definitely noticed that, like, the people that have moved here. I mean, I met the CEO of Sarepta, former CEO of Sarepta Therapeutics, a company that is worked on rare disease for decades. And like I didn't think I would run into him. I ran into him in Nashville, Tennessee. I didn't know I was going to run into him. I traded his stock in high school like an idiot, when it was like at 40, and now it's, or 20 or 15 or something. And now it's 180. And now he moved from Boston to Nashville. And I just go, I never thought I'd run to this guy. But at the end of the day, it's like, everyone's really passionate about like growing the ecosystem, and it's not some like, it's not BS. Like, you can tell it, and you can sort of tell from that they're being genuine, and actually they want you here, and they want you to like take advantage of all the resources available, and like, how can we help you? How can we help your company grow? Like, how can we get your tech here? Because ultimately, like, everybody sort of wins. I mean, the state wins, the city wins. You bring on really bright people from Vandy, from University of Tennessee, from name the institution. You bring people from out of state, in state, and like, at the end of the day, it's a great place to be, and people are super kind. And I have a soft spot in my heart for the South. So, especially as a guy from Portland, that like couldn't be more polar opposite. So, I love it personally.
Awesome. Well, where can people learn more about NeuroX1?
LinkedIn, just NeuroX1 will come up. Our website, neurox1.com. My Twitter is just Max Dordevic, MaxDordevic on Twitter. We post the most on LinkedIn.
It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we appreciate you and all the work that you are doing. So, yeah, thanks, man.